They say no one is indispensable, that every cog in the corporate machine can be replaced by a cheaper, younger version of itself. My new manager, Brad, a 26-year-old MBA graduate who thought a cloud was just something that ruined his golf game, certainly believed that. He called me into his glass-walled office, handed me a cardboard box, and told me my 15 years of loyalty to Nexus Logistics were being restructured to save the company $60,000 a year. He thought he was a genius for outsourcing my role to an offshore firm. He thought he was firing a redundant employee. What he didn't realize was that I didn't just maintain the system, I was the system. And those proprietary automation scripts that kept their $200 million billing cycle from collapsing? I wrote those on my own time, on my own laptop, and I never signed over the intellectual property rights. When I walked out that door, I didn't just take my coffee mug. I took the ghost in the machine. Here is how my firing cost the company $200 million in 48 hours and why Brad had to call me, sobbing, while the CEO watched his career go up in flames. Welcome to ThreadVerse. My name is Ethan. For 15 years, I was the senior systems architect at Nexus Logistics. To the outside world, Nexus was a titan, a global shipping and freight forwarding company that moved millions of tons of cargo every day across 3 continents. To me, Nexus was a delicate, intricate web of data, servers, and code that I had personally woven together since the company was just 10 people in a rented warehouse. I lived in the server room, a cold, humming sanctuary of blinking blue lights and the smell of ozone. I loved it. I'm a guy who prefers the company of Python scripts and SQL databases over humans. Humans are messy. They have egos and agendas. Code, however, is honest. If a system fails, it's because a logic gate was wrong. It's structural. For over a decade, I was the ghost in the machine. I knew every glitch, every workaround, and every legacy patch that kept our aging mainframe talking to our modern web interface. I had built an automation suite, a collection of shadow scripts that handled the complex tax calculations for international shipping. These scripts were my masterpiece. They turned a process that used to take 40 human hours into a 3-second automated task. The most important part? I wrote those scripts at home, on my personal hardware, during my weekends, because I love the challenge. Under my original contract from 15 years ago, a contract written before the company had a legal department, anything I created outside of office hours on personal equipment remained my proprietary intellectual property. I never brought it up because I liked the company. I liked the old CEO, Mr. Henderson. He was a handshake kind of guy. He knew I was the reason the lights stayed on, and in return, he gave me a generous salary and total autonomy. Then, 6 months ago, Mr. Henderson retired. His replacement was his sister's son, Brad Miller. Brad was a disruptor. He came in wearing slim-fit suits, using words like synergy, lean management, and cost optimization every 5 seconds. He didn't look at the system. He looked at the payroll. The first time Brad walked into my server room, he made a face like he'd just stepped into a trash can. "It's too cold in here, Ethan," he said, checking his reflection in the glass of a server rack. "And why do we have all this hardware? My friends in Silicon Valley say everything should be in the cloud." "The cloud is just someone else's computer, Brad," I said, not looking up from my monitor. "Our current on-site setup is 3 times faster for the volume of data we process, and it's fully paid for. Moving to a cloud provider would triple our monthly overhead." Brad sighed, a long, condescending sound. "That's old guard thinking, Ethan. We need to be agile. I've been looking at your salary. Do you realize I could hire an entire team of junior developers in Eastern Europe for what we pay you in a year?" "You could," I said, finally looking at him. "But they wouldn't know why the billing cycle crashes every 3rd Thursday of the month when the currency exchange rates fluctuate." "We'll document it," Brad said, waving a hand dismissively. "That's what manuals are for. I want you to start a knowledge transfer phase. Document everything you do. Every script, every password, every trick you have. I want a full manual on my desk by the end of the month." I felt a cold prickle of realization. Brad wasn't looking to optimize. He was looking to replace me with a cheaper, outsourced version of myself. He wanted me to hand over the keys to the kingdom so he could kick me out of it. "I'll document the system architecture and the standard operating procedures, Brad," I said. "But my proprietary automation suite, that's a different story. Don't get technical with me, Ethan," Brad snapped, his cool boss facade slipping for a second. "You work for Nexus. Nexus owns what you do. Just get it done." I didn't argue. In my world, you don't fight with words, you fight with logic. I went back to my desk and began the knowledge transfer. I documented the servers. I documented the network topology. I documented the basic software. But I didn't document the ghost code. The ghost code was the glue. It was the 10,000 lines of proprietary Python that lived on a local virtual drive, acting as the translator between our outdated database and our modern billing software. Without that glue, the two systems couldn't speak the same language. A month passed. I turned in a 300-page manual. Brad didn't even read it. He just handed it to a rep from an offshore consulting firm during a Zoom call and smiled. The following Friday, I was called into the boardroom. Brad was there, sitting at the head of the table. Next to him was a woman from HR who wouldn't look me in the eye. "Ethan, sit down," Brad said, his voice forced and cheerful. "First of all, I want to thank you for your 15 years of service. You've been a real fixture around here. Fixture, like a lamp or a toilet. However," Brad continued, "as part of our Nexus 2.0 Lean initiative, we've decided to move the senior systems architect role to our offshore partners. It's purely a financial decision. Your position is being made redundant, effective immediately." He slid a manila envelope across the table. "We're offering you 2 weeks of severance, which is more than the law requires since your original contract was so outdated." 2 weeks. After 15 years. "I see," I said, my voice remarkably calm. "And the systems? The billing cycle starts on Monday." "Oh, don't you worry about that," Brad smirked, leaning back in his chair. "The guys in Bangalore have your manual. They've already started the migration. They said it looks straightforward. We don't need a ghost in the machine anymore, Ethan. We have a manual." I stood up. I didn't ask for more money. I didn't plead for my job. I just picked up my coffee mug and the small box of my personal belongings I'd already packed. "One last thing, Brad," I said as I reached the door. "What's that?" "The automation scripts on the Z drive. Those aren't part of the Nexus server image. They run on a local instance that I personally maintained. Since they aren't in the manual, you might want to ask your new team how they plan to handle the Friday currency reconciliation." Brad laughed. "Ethan, please. It's code. How hard can it be? Good luck with your structure, or whatever it is you do." I walked out of the building and into the bright afternoon sun. I sat in my car, looking at the glass tower I'd spent my entire adult life protecting. I took out my personal laptop, opened a terminal, and logged into my private cloud storage. I clicked a single button that disconnected the link between my proprietary Z drive and the Nexus server. I wasn't deleting anything. I was simply taking back what was mine. The glue was gone. "It's Friday afternoon, Brad," I whispered to the rearview mirror. "The system will keep running on momentum for about 48 hours. But when the global billing cycle triggers on Sunday night at midnight, the machine is going to find out that the ghost has left the building." I put the car in gear and drove home. I had 15 years of vacation time I'd never taken. I think I'll start with a very long nap. They say that corporate giants never sleep. But on Sunday night, at exactly 12:01 a.m., Nexus Logistics didn't just sleep. It went into a coma. Brad thought a 300-page manual was enough to replace 15 years of intuition. He thought that straightforward migration meant everything would just work. He was about to find out that a machine without its soul is just a very expensive pile of junk. And while I was at home, sipping an old-fashioned and watching a classic movie, Brad was about to watch his career vanish in a cloud of error logs. Saturday and Sunday were the most peaceful days I'd had in a decade. For 15 years, I had been tethered to that company. My phone was always on my nightstand, my laptop always charged, waiting for that 3 a.m. alert that a server in Singapore had gone offline. But this weekend, silence. I took Buster for a long hike in the woods. I cooked a real meal. I didn't check a single dashboard. It felt like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew exactly what was happening back at the office, though. The offshore team in Bangalore would have spent the weekend migrating the legacy database to the new cloud environment Brad was so obsessed with. On paper, it looks easy. You move the data, you point the API to the new address, and you hit run. But they didn't have the Z drive. The Z drive wasn't just a folder. It was a bridge. You see, Nexus's legacy database was written in an ancient language that modern cloud billing software couldn't interpret. My proprietary scripts acted as the universal translator. They took the messy, raw data, cleaned it, formatted it, and fed it into the billing engine in real time. Without those scripts, the two systems were like two people trying to talk to each other in languages they didn't understand. Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. I was sitting on my porch, looking at the stars. I knew the global billing cycle was about to trigger. This was the moment Nexus collected money from thousands of clients across the globe. $200 million was supposed to move through the pipes in the next 6 hours. At 12:05 a.m., my personal phone, the one I'd never given to anyone but my old boss, stayed silent. But I could almost feel the vibration of the panic starting 10,000 miles away. The first error would have been a null pointer exception. The billing engine would have reached out for the data, And instead of the clean, formatted stream my scripts provided, it would have received nothing. Total silence. Monday morning arrived. I woke up at 9 a.m., made a pot of coffee, and turned on my laptop. Not to work, but to check the news. Nexus Logistics was already trending on some tech forums. Nexus global billing down. Thousands of shipments halted at customs. You see, at Nexus, if the billing doesn't clear, the shipping manifests don't get stamped. If the manifests don't get stamped, the cargo doesn't move. Right now, in ports from Rotterdam to Hong Kong, thousands of containers were sitting on docks because the digital ghost wasn't there to sign the checks. At 10:15 a.m., my phone finally rang. It wasn't Brad. It was Sarah, the HR woman who had looked so ashamed during my firing. Ethan, her voice sounded shaky, frantic. I'm so sorry to bother you on your transition, but we're having some technical difficulties here. Brad is in a meeting with the board of directors, and the offshore team says they can't find the automation bridge mentioned in the system logs. The automation bridge, Sarah? I said, leaning back and taking a sip of coffee. That's strange. Did they check the manual I wrote? It's 300 pages long. Brad said it was straightforward. They've read it twice, Ethan. They say the manual covers the hardware and the basic software, but it doesn't mention how the database communicates with the billing engine. Everything is failing. We're losing $3 million an hour in port fees alone. That sounds like a major optimization problem, Sarah, I said calmly. But as Brad mentioned, I'm redundant. I'm no longer an employee of Nexus. I'm just a guy with a coffee mug and a lot of free time. Ethan, please. Brad is panicking. He's been screaming at the Bangalore team for 4 hours. Can you just tell us where the scripts are? Just a quick hint. I can't do that, Sarah, I said. Those scripts aren't Nexus property. I wrote them on my own time, on my own equipment. They were never part of the knowledge transfer because they weren't part of my job description. They were a courtesy, and as of last Friday, that courtesy has expired. She went silent for a moment. I could hear shouting in the background, Brad's high-pitched, entitled voice. He's coming over here, Sarah whispered. Ethan, please stay by the phone. The line went dead. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the main Nexus boardroom line. I let it ring. Once. Twice. On the third ring, I picked up. Ethan. Brad's voice exploded through the speaker. He didn't sound like a disruptor anymore. He sounded like a man whose hair was on fire. What the hell did you do to the system? Everything is crashed. The board is breathing down my neck. Fix it. Right now. This is an order. Brad, I said, my voice dropping into that cool, architectural tone that used to drive him crazy. You fired me, remember? You don't give me orders anymore. In fact, you should be careful with your tone. I might decide to block this number. There was a muffled sound, probably Brad trying to breathe. Then, I heard a different voice. Deeper, older. Ethan, this is Marcus, the CFO. We've met a few times with Mr. Henderson. I remember you, Marcus, I said. You're the one who actually understands the math. Ethan, we are in a crisis, Marcus said, his voice tight but professional. We have $200 million in unbilled revenue and 50,000 containers stuck in ports. Brad tells me you're withholding scripts that belong to the company. Brad is misinformed, Marcus. Under my original contract, Section 4.2 regarding intellectual property created outside of business hours, those scripts are my proprietary property. I used them to make my job easier, but they were never part of the Nexus server image. I took them with me when I was made redundant. Marcus went quiet. He was a numbers guy. He knew exactly what proprietary property meant for the company's bottom line. What do you want, Ethan? Marcus asked. I don't want my job back, Marcus, I said. I'm enjoying my redundancy. But if you want to license my software and hire me as an external consultant to fix this, we can talk about my new rates. Rates? Brad's voice screamed in the background. He's a thief. We'll sue him. Brad, shut up. Marcus barked. Then, back to me. What are the rates, Ethan? $500,000 for a 1-year software license, I said, paid up front, and $50,000 per week for my consulting services, with a 4-week minimum. Also, I want a written apology from Brad, copied to the entire board, for his mismanagement of the transition. The silence on the other end was absolute. Brad was probably turning a shade of purple that didn't even exist in nature. We'll call you back, Marcus said. I hung up. I looked at Buster. I think we're going to need a bigger dog bed, buddy. The machine was broken. The ghost was gone. And for the first time in 15 years, the price of the architecture was finally being set by the architect. They say that the hardest thing to swallow is your own pride. For Brad, it was a 5-course meal of humiliation, served with a side of corporate reality. He thought he could fire the old guard and replace 15 years of genius with a PDF manual. He was about to find out that when the machine stops, it doesn't care about your MBA or your family connections. It only cares about the person who knows how to make it breathe. And while Brad was drafting the most embarrassing email of his life, I was deciding which beach I wanted to visit after I collected my first consultant check. The call from Marcus came back exactly 2 hours later. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID to know they had folded. When you're losing $3 million an hour, a $500,000 licensing fee isn't an expense. It's a bargain. Ethan, Marcus said, his voice sounding older, more weary. The board has approved your terms. The software licensing agreement is being drafted by our legal team as we speak. The $500,000 will be wired to your account the moment you signed the digital contract. And the consulting fee, Marcus? I asked, leaning back in my favorite armchair with Buster at my feet. And the apology? I heard a heavy sigh, followed by the sound of a door closing. Marcus was clearly alone now. Brad is resistant. But the CEO, his uncle, has given him an ultimatum. Either he sends that email, or he follows you out the door. The board is furious, Ethan. They saw the knowledge transfer manual he bragged about. They realized it was like trying to fly a Boeing 747 using a brochure for a paper airplane. I'll be waiting for the email, Marcus. Once I see it hit my inbox, I'll head to the office. 10 minutes later, it arrived. A company-wide email sent to every single employee at Nexus Logistics, from the London office to the Tokyo warehouse. Subject, formal apology and transition update. I would like to personally apologize to Ethan Daniels for the mishandling of our recent structural transition. My assessment of his proprietary automation suite was incorrect, and his role was never redundant. I take full responsibility for the system downtime and the resulting disruptions. We are thrilled to welcome Ethan back as a senior lead consultant to guide us through this crisis. Bradley Miller, regional manager. I smiled. It was a masterpiece of forced humility. I could almost feel the heat of Brad's rage radiating through the screen. I put on my best suit, the one I usually only wore to Henderson's retirement parties, and drove to the office. When I pulled into the parking lot, the security guard, who had watched me carry a cardboard box out of the building just 3 days ago, stood up and gave me a crisp nod. Good to see you back, Mr. Daniels, he said. The building is a mess. Everyone's running around like the floor is on fire. It is on fire, Tommy, I said, tapping my briefcase. I'm just the guy with the only fire extinguisher in the city. I walked into the lobby. Usually, I was the invisible man in the server room. But today, people stopped in their tracks. I saw the marketing team whispering, the HR department nodding in respect, and the junior developers looking at me like I was a wizard arriving at the Battle of the Five Armies. I didn't go to my old desk. I walked straight into the executive wing, to the corner office that had been empty since Mr. Henderson left. Marcus was waiting there, along with 2 members of the board. And Brad. Brad looked terrible. His disruptor suit was wrinkled, his tie was crooked, and his face was a shade of red that matched the system failure alerts on the big screens in the hallway. He didn't look at me. He stared at the floor. Ethan, Marcus said, shaking my hand firmly. The wire transfer has been initiated. You should see the funds in your account within the hour. Please, tell us you can fix this. I can fix it in 10 minutes, Marcus, I said, setting my laptop on the mahogany desk. But I have a few new rules for my consulting period. Brad looked up then, his eyes burning. Rules? We're paying you a fortune. Just do your job. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on Marcus. Rule number 1. Brad is barred from the server room. In fact, he is barred from the entire IT floor. His input has cost this company enough. If I see him near my hardware, I walk. And the license for my code is revoked instantly. Marcus didn't even hesitate. Done. Bradley, you are to move your operations to the satellite office in the suburbs until further notice. Brad's jaw dropped. The satellite office was a windowless room next to a warehouse. It was the corporate equivalent of being sent to the basement. Rule number 2. I continued. I report only to you, Marcus, and the CEO. No middle managers. No synergy meetings. Agreed, Marcus said. I opened my laptop. I didn't even need to go to the server room. I logged into my Z drive, re-established the secure handshake between my scripts and the Nexus mainframe, and hit the global reconcile button. On the monitors in the hallway, the thousands of red error lines suddenly turned green. The ghost was back. The billing cycle is resuming, I said, pointing to the real-time revenue tracker on the wall. The manifests are being digitally signed. The containers in Rotterdam should be moving in about 20 minutes. The 2 board members exhaled a breath they seemed to have been holding for 48 hours. One of them actually clapped me on the shoulder. You're a lifesaver, Daniels, he said. I looked at Brad, who was standing by the door, clutching his leather briefcase like a shield. It's not magic, Brad, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet office. It's architecture. You thought you could save $60,000 by firing the guy who knew where the foundation was. You ended up spending $500,000 just to get the keys back. I hope they taught you that in your MBA program. Never burn a bridge when you're still standing on it. Brad didn't say a word. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hall. I spent the next 4 weeks as a consultant. I didn't do much. My scripts did all the heavy lifting. I spent most of my time drinking high-end coffee and teaching the offshore team in Bangalore how to actually read a system log. They were good kids. They just hadn't been given the right tools by a manager who didn't understand the job. By the end of the month, the CEO called me into his office. He offered me my old job back, with a massive raise and a vice president title. I appreciate the offer, sir, I said, smiling. But I think I prefer the consultant life. It gives me more time for my dog. And besides, the licensing fee for my code is an annual contract. I'll see you next year for the renewal. I walked out of Nexus Logistics for the last time as an employee, but not as the redundant guy with a cardboard box. I was the architect who had proven that in the digital age, the most valuable asset isn't the building or the brand or the synergy. It's the person who knows how the ghost in the machine actually works. Thanks for sticking around until the very end of this journey. Ethan's story is a powerful reminder that in the modern world, your skills are your greatest leverage. Money can buy a fancy office and a title, but it can never buy the 15 years of intuition and soul that a dedicated architect puts into their work. Brad thought he was disrupting the industry, but he only succeeded in disrupting his own future. If you enjoyed watching corporate greed get a reality check, do me a huge favor, smash that like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm find other people who need to see that the underdog can win. Also, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to join the ThreadVerse community. We bring you original stories of justice, karma, and the truth behind the curtain every single day. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. Has your boss ever made a massive mistake by underestimating you? Or have you ever witnessed malicious compliance at your own workplace? I read every single one of your stories, and I can't wait to see what you have to share. Stay loyal, stay sharp, and always remember, never burn the bridge when you're still standing on it. I'm Andrew, and I'll see you in the next one.